So it's time for the flanker tier list video. If you haven't seen the one I did right before this on damages, I'll put that in the description alongside a secret video or two that will be on a different channel, which I put in the comments I think of that video, but just in case you missed either of those two, check them out. But this is more of a personal tier list than a meta tier list. The meta does play into it, at least a tiny bit for sure, but it isn't really the main thing I'm going for. It's more just my tier list for the characters, and the meta is kind of like a secondary part to it. We do have the patch notes now though for the next update, and I said in the last one that I'd make any changes if I felt like it was necessary, but surprisingly, even though the update's got a decent amount of stuff in it, and I did mess around in target practice, I'm probably going to miss the PTS this time around, like making videos on it and stuff. I will of course cover the changes when they go into live, but I'll take it into consideration for the flank, frontlines and supports, and for the damages, yeah, not really going to change any of it. Overall, really solid update, some really good changes in there though. Specifically, just a random one I want to point out is Vivian's recoil being removed. A lot of quality of life stuff that's sort of like that just is way better, but also a few that I don't really agree with. I'll talk about that stuff and more in a different video again when I cover stuff when it goes into live. Bit of a long intro, just wanted to get that all the way, and thank you guys of course for the love on the first video, but let's just jump into the actual tier list and get this going. We're going for Andro first, of course. He's going straight into A. I very much thought of putting him in S. He really isn't that far away from being in S tier, but he's just got a few things that kind of hold him back a bit for me, even though he's a really good example, nearly perfect example actually, of a flanker. He's going into A tier. Overall, I like his kit a hell of a lot. Sometimes it goes absolutely massive. His talents also, I think, fit relatively well. The only complaint I really have is sometimes he feels a little bit jank and can be kind of rough, as with most flankers. Sometimes it just really doesn't work, but his cards are a little bit lacking. You pretty much always run reset, but the fact that you have a bit and some ammo gen, it's not too much that you actually see here. There are a few variants, but not bad cards, not bad builds. I just need to give you a bit of reason as to why he's not in S, because I don't want to have 5 flankers in S tier, but yeah, he really isn't that far off of it. Don't really need to yap too much about Andro. I feel like pretty much everybody's familiar with him. Next up though, Buck. He's another character that I'm very tempted to put in S tier for a few reasons. He's been strong for a really long time, but he's also just really good fun to play. They have given him a decent amount of variety in the sort of build selection, even though some cards are definitely standouts and I'm surprised are as strong as they are. Still, 70% on the limbs is just crazy. Maybe they should move some of it into his base kit. I don't know really what they should do with Buck, but yeah, he has the variety, he has the fun factor, he has the strength there as well. He's kind of like a full-on kind of powerhouse of a flanker. Bulk up, bounce house, all really solid. Ensign a little bit less so, but definitely isn't terrible either. I reckon I have to put him into S tier. The combo is just so much fun. I think the main thing that stopped me from doing it actually is just how annoying he is sometimes on the enemy team, where I can't really play the character I'm trying to play because the enemy Buck is just going kind of crazy. So he's going into S. I was tempted to put him into A, but yeah, he's deserving of that spot. Before I go to Caspian though, I really just want to point out again, I think I've done this in all the Buck videos after the changes, the quality of life stuff they gave to him was just kind of revolutionary. The ammo, then like the F being on the limbs instead of kills, and all the other changes have added up to him, yeah, definitely deserving that S spot. But previously, I probably would have put him in like a B, or although A. Caspian though is going into C. The flanker tier is probably going to be the most jumpy out of the lot, with S being kind of stacked, but yeah, fits the name. I feel like it fits where he's been for a little while for me. Previously, maybe I'd have put him in A. He's definitely been at both ends of the tier list for me, and yeah, right now he's sitting a little bit towards the lower end, even though again, he has the potential to be way higher up there. He does have more of a sort of movement thing going on, especially with the changes in the next update that they're trying to do for him, but it isn't there just yet for me, so I'm going to have to put him into C. I wish I could put him higher, but yeah. Next up, Evie. Another character I wish I could put higher. I'm just not really in the mood to play Evie as much as I kind of used to be. Previously, I would have placed her somewhere around an A, but she's sitting pretty close to Caspian these days at around a C, but that isn't really because of her being different. Unlike with Caspian, it's more just actual my sort of preference for characters being different meta-wise for both of them. I don't know if I'd put them in a C. Evie specifically, if you're up against a good one, is just insanely annoying and really strong, but for me these days, even though sometimes I do pick her up and have fun with her, compared to the other flankers, the probability of that is quite a bit lower, so she's going into C. Feel kind of odd about the placement of both those two, to be honest with you, but let's just keep it going, and I jump into Kasumi, who's also going to go probably right next to them in like C. I wish I could put her higher as well, because I love the idea that they tried to do when moving her from a damage to a flank. I think that was overall probably a good decision. It's just that unless you play a very specific way, which is quite unique, to be honest, with like the mines and stuff, it doesn't really feel that great. She definitely still has a decent amount of potential, whereas with the other two, again, kind of referencing back, I don't think Evie really needs to be changed. Caspian definitely could do with some stuff, but Kasumi is the one I feel like is the least tuned, even though, again, I don't really see her that much. It's kind of hard for me to judge it, but when I play her, she just still feels a little bit jank, mainly because the weapon is, I think, the main reason she's going to go into C for me. Even though I've definitely been a little bit more negative about these three, people definitely show with them, and I do too, depending on the occasion, but yeah, just a little bit less on my sort of preference. Moving on to Koga, the character that's on the complete other end. He's going straight into S tier, especially with other changes they're putting in the next update with the dash and stuff, and Adrenaline Junkie going into base kit finally. As I'm sure you know if you've been following the channel, Koga has been a peak character for me for a while, whether it's the SMGs I've loved forever or the claws I picked up in like the last 2 years or something. I just love Koga. Never really liked Dragon Fangs though, never really been my sort of thing. That's possibly the only complaint I have. Blood Reaper also isn't perfect, again preference wise, but Adrenaline Junkie going into base kit is something I've wanted for a while with like a dash talent option. So that's like a third place. I can go full SMGs, full claws, mix them. I guess that's kind of 3 already, and then the dash setup, which will hopefully be a thing, even if it isn't as good. So I like Koga a lot. Moving on to Lex though, he's going into the lower end of B. I like the weapons these days. I also like the mark and the slide and the ultimate, even though I'm terrible with it. Pretty unique sort of kit he's got going on. The auto aim on the right click I never really loved, but yeah, generally I think Lex is pretty much the perfect example for me of a B tier character. Cards I think are fine. Builds I don't really have any complaints. I feel like a decent amount of these actually see use depending on the player, and yeah, talent wise also sort of fine, even though it's been a bit messy recently. Death hastens and the sort of slow way of playing him I do find to be really, really enjoyable. He just doesn't have enough movement for me to put him any higher than sort of a middle of B, but I think he really does nail the sort of style and character he's going for. So even though I'm putting him kind of in the middle, I feel like he deserves more than that. Next up though, Maeve, another character I think really does execute perfectly what she's trying to be, whether that's the talents and the builds that I haven't really gone through pretty consistently in this video for the different characters, but I think Maeve really does nail it. It's just that thing that she's trying to be isn't really for me, so she's going into D tier. Someone has to go down there, and I think it has to be Maeve. Hard for me to really explain why after I just talked about it kind of positively, and again, I think her kit is really, really cohesive. It kind of all comes together quite well, and I don't really see why people would put her into S. It's just that for me, that sort of character, the daggers I think are really one of the main reasons, just like with Kasumi. The main weapon for Maeve for me has always felt kind of jank, and I feel like I'm fighting against it. Realistically, she should go into A or B, but yeah, just preference-wise, she has to go into D because I feel like I'm constantly trying to fight her character. Sometimes it does work, and sometimes I feel like she's an A tier character, which is where she kind of belongs, if you get what I'm trying to say. Just that preference-wise, Maeve is not my type of character these days. Next up though, Skye. She's going, again, kind of with Lex comfortably in to the B tier, which I think she fits in. She's a classic flanker for sure. These days, her invis is a little bit rough, which is why she's going into the lower end of B, but they definitely could do some stuff to make that a little bit better. Build-wise, she's got some really cool stuff going on with the self-heal and the speed, and that's really the way she's a flanker these days. Not with the invis, it's more just moving around it done with the speed. I do think that her whole kit fits pretty well together, talents and builds and everything, except for prep, which I've always found to be a little bit weird, so I don't really have too many things I could say about Skye. She's going into B tier. Sometimes I like her when I'm having good fun and zooming around. If I'm getting really hard countered though, she feels super rough. I feel like with flankers, more than most other categories, it's super swingy. Next up though, Talus is going into the higher end of B tier. That's being carried pretty heavily by preference. I think meta-wise he does struggle a little bit compared to some of the other ones if you were to imagine in quite a few of the scenarios, but he is still decently strong, especially when played correctly and, you know, utilizing his kit, which I feel like people don't do enough. I do love Talus. He's kind of one of my all-time favorites, even though I don't really talk about that much. I wish he had more variety with the cards because a lot of these have been duds. Preference-wise, I'd probably put him around an A. It's just that performance-wise with him, it's actually pulling it down a little bit with how much I actually want to play him, and it's putting him into like a B+. He's had some stuff in the past that made him a little bit stronger. They nerfed inner strength, which I really didn't like, and the other talents though, and pretty much his entire kit I think fit quite well together, and I like what he is as a character, so he's going into B+, maybe though A. It really does depend a bit. I just wish he had some more sort of power and oomph sometimes. Even that's not what he's trying to be as a character. Kind of hard for me to explain what I mean. He is definitely a favourite, it's just the weaknesses he has are so obvious at the moment that it's hard for me to put him higher than a B+, because it really does affect how much I want to play him, if that makes any sense. Next up though, 7, a character who is bounced around the tier list a ton. Right now I feel like he deserves to be right around like the lower end of B, middle of B, somewhere around there. Previously I'd probably put him maybe even in an S, but sometimes also in like a C. Build-wise he's got some interesting stuff going on, mostly around reset health and sometimes reload speed, if that's what you want to run, or speed with the fire modes. The weapon overall is really cool. Overcharged has always been a bit weird, like the ultimate talents. I said that in a different video, but never really liked it. He still has movement and a really cool kit, just a little bit less than before. I feel like he's tailored to something a little bit different than what my preference is, so he's going somewhere around a B. I feel like I could just say he's grown off for me a little bit and simplify it to that, but it's a little bit more complicated. Anyway, let's just jump on to the next one. I've talked about 7 so much in other videos that I don't really feel like I should do it again here, but I really wish I could put him into S tier still. Next up though, we're on the last 3 who are actually all going into quite high spots. Vatu, the Shadow, he could easily go into S tier as well, and especially with the changes in the next update where they're making his weapon kind of back to how it was before, firing a little bit faster, and some of the other changes. He's going to go into A though. The way he plays though, really quite unique and a ton of fun. It's just the support around it isn't there at the moment with the talents and the builds. I feel like just kind of lacking. I wish I could put him higher. He is still going into A tier, but yeah, just isn't deserving of that S spot right at the moment, even though in the future I hope that he can go back up there. Pretty quick one, but I've also talked about Vatu quite a bit, I feel like. We got Vora, another character I talked a ton about. She's going into S tier though. I feel like she still deserves the S. Check the Vora videos out if you want to hear me yap more about that sort of stuff, but I still do really, really like her kit. Talent wise, I feel like, especially with the way they're changing them, she's going to have a decent amount of variety. I really like Relentless going into the base kit. That's the thing I've wanted for ages. Definitely silence I might miss a little bit, not having the silence on there. Not that I really grabbed it that much, but right click, F and Q talent, I like the idea. That will hopefully work out. Hard for me to say because I've only played around in target practice and stuff, but they definitely might need a little bit of tweaking. Card wise, she definitely could have some more interesting stuff in here, but a decent amount of these do see play, and she has got some really cool cards. So despite the fact that I do have some complaints about Vora, I think she's still super deserving of that S spot, even though she might not be at number 1. I don't know if Koga's going to be above her, when I put the actual final tier list together. And again, just to clarify, the tiers are organised, just not massively. But to finish off the video, we're ending strong here again, just like in the damage one, surprisingly. We've got Zhin, who is also very much deserving of that S tier and might even go above Vora these days. I'm not sure. I like Zhin a ton. Definitely deserving of like a king flanker status. His kit is just insane, especially combat with like the talents and specifically the builds. Some of the cards here are just insanely strong, especially after some of the changes that he had not that long ago. He's got a decent amount of variety, which I've said a ton, but there are so many ways you can tweak this, even though the core cards tend to be the same sort of really strong ones. Talent-wise, he's like 1.7 out of 3 for me. Guillotine I do really like. Smolder I think is also decent, but Yomi's always been a little bit weird for me, and I feel like these could do with definitely some sort of stuff being changed. But again, his base kit and the cards are just so strong that he's still deserving of the S tier. The time that you combine the sort of skill ceiling with Zhin is ridiculous. Very similar to with Buck. The difference between an average one and a really good one, you actually physically feel in a match because you have to completely change how you're going to play, and it really does sort of make a mess. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm going to cut it. I do want to point out though that I thought originally, before I put these two videos together, that I generally didn't prefer projectile characters, but Vatu, Vora and Zhin kind of go against the idea. Zhin projectiles I don't dislike. I don't really dislike Vora's projectiles. Such a kind of a thing that I like with the way she plays, even though I kind of prefer she used to be with a faster, different fire rate, maybe. So it seems like specific characters give me trouble with their projectiles for some reason. Don't know why. I need to think about that more. I just wanted to point it out because I was going to say that projectile characters tend to be my less favourites, but isn't really the case. I'll put a link to all the videos in the description. Some of them might not be out when this one goes up, obviously, but thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate staying away to the end of my voice. It's completely gone. I'll see you all, of course, very soon. I can't speak. Thank you for all the love, and as always, stay frosty.